Yeah, so it's a history lesson. What I've learned is what we think we know just ain't so. That's a Mark Twain thing, right? And a lot of what we even hear on media now, a lot of it's all like spun in certain ways. Financial systems, the way it's built, how banks work. I'm like, again, they're there to make money. What I want people to do is open it up with an open mind and have a pen. It is a money journal. It is meant to be work done, and it's not to give you, well, here's the 5 steps to do all this, right? As we do this, and there's another book called The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham, is the questions may be the same, but the answers may change, right? As we go through the STILL method, as we think through this, how I'm going to operate for my son as a 6-year-old may be different than when he's 15, right? But I still want him to be in those same, like how I operate that. And so I want them to open it, I totally get it, but also write in it, actually engage in it and think. That's the problem in our world is we just tweet or what, I don't know what you call it now, without thinking. And we need to have thinking involved.
Everybody, welcome back to the podcast. To have another great guest on the show. We're going to dual purpose this because we have my Dad's Space podcast. We have Living the Next Chapter, our author podcast. So we're going to do 2 for 1 at the same time. So this will be fun. Brandon is here. He was on my my How to Podcast series to talk about his podcast, which is great. Wealth, Wisdom, Financial Podcast. You got to go listen, subscribe, follow, and listen to every single episode because it's all gold for you in your financial journey. So make sure you do that. We'll have a link for that in the show notes. As always, Brandon is back to talk about his books, talk about his writing, and talk to dads at the same time. So Brandon, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, David, thanks for having me. And I'm excited as I am a father to a 6.5-year-old. You have to say the half-year-old because that's what happens when you have a 6-year-old. So we have a lot of fun in our household.
Excellent. And you work with people through your podcast, through your business, through your books, everything around finances. This is a topic I know for dads that we kind of wrestle with, being new dads and figuring it out as we go. We also have a financial piece to what we have to do in this world. So I'm excited to have you on to kind of talk about that. We're going to talk about your book as well. So thank you again for making time for this. Let's talk about your book and why it would be a great resource for any dad, any parent listening. Tell us kind of why we should have a copy of your book and how will it help us?
Yeah, so actually it's right behind me. 5 Smooth Stones is the book, and it's a interactive money journal. And really what we did was we said, okay, if my son, who's sick, again, 6.5, what would I give him if I was to be gone tomorrow? What are the principles? What are the things that I would say, here's my, I wouldn't say Bible, but roadmap for him to be a thoughtful person in his financial world? Because, life is going to change, tax codes are going to change, all the things, who knows what will happen? I mean, we've seen that in the past 3 weeks, how quickly things can change, right? So in this, book is more about principles, right? And so the book is called 5 Smooth Stones, and it came out of the Bible, meaning David and Goliath. And David was given 5 stones to beat his Goliath, and he used 1, according to that. And so then what we've thought about is we have a Goliath in our world. Sometimes it's big corporations, right? There's a Goliath. They're so big that we have to figure it out. I believe our Goliath is chaos. And in that book, we talk about how to overcome chaos, right? And it's confusion, haphazardness, anxious, overwhelming, and stressfulness. Those things I don't know about you, but in even the past month or so, I've experienced more chaos, not less, right? More of this anxious and anxiety. And for me, I want to be able to give my son a different narrative, right? And so, how do we do that? And so, as money goes, money is meant to keep us confused. Donald Miller says, if you confuse, you lose, right? And so I'm like, oh, well, okay. He wrote Blue Like Jazz. Sorry, he wrote Blue Like Jazz. And he also wrote Story Brand, right? So, so with that, I think about moving from chaos to clarity, right? Everybody wants clarity. They just don't know how to get there. Most of the time, people are looking for shortcuts. My son, always looking for the shortcut, right? Even as a 6-year-old, how do I get there without having the effort and work? The problem is, it takes work and it takes stopping, actually not moving, stopping. And so for me, we have to stay, okay, we have chaos. How do we move from chaos to still? So in our book, we talk about a method we call the still method. And I will say this is a money book. It's about understanding the financials that go there. But a lot of people haven't even stopped to say, what do I want in life? You know, I talk to clients all the time, and I'm like, what's your dreams and goals? And they're like, that's a great question. And I'm like, well, no, not, it should be a fundamental question. So you have to set your sights, right? For me as a father, what kind of father do I want to be? Am I actually doing, not just going to implement the things, but what are the things I'm wanting to see? So I have to set my sights towards that. I'll stop here for a second, but I'll keep going once we
I
have
love
a
it.
question.
Well, that's why I'm glad you're here. This is great, Brian. So my question to you, because when I talk to dads and I look at my own life, I look back in my past, and there's been moments where money was my enemy, debt was my enemy, credit cards, not having a plan, okay, just going through life, Monday, paycheck to paycheck, and when you get to you go buy your groceries, you're hoping that your debit card works and there's enough room on there to pay for the groceries. There's a lot of times when we live really close to the edge financially. Was there ever a point for you in your own life or as a child in your family where money was your enemy and kind of put you on this course to help people with their finances?
A couple things, yes, for sure. I was raised by my wife was on federal assistance, right? Like literally, when I think about some of these programs cut, I'm like, we wouldn't have been able to live because of the single mom and being able to have that food stamps, those kind of things that helped us, right? And so we've lived with not having anything, a mom that some of the issues, I think, were self-inflicted, right? And some of it, I'm like, I need to take ownership, right? Or that kind of thing. And so at the core, whenever I started our journey, we also wanted to make a difference in the world. So what I learned in our business was Overflow Coffee Shop. And the reason I sold that is because, I'm having a child. I'm like, well, I can't legally have a baby behind the bar anymore. So things need to change. Um, so I did that. But Overflow, I could, if I don't take care of me, I can't overflow to other people. And so that was something of saying, okay, I need to get my own house in order before I'm telling somebody else how their house is burning down. Right?
Yeah,
Does that make
yeah.
sense? And our book is almost saying, here's how I got my house in order financially. And most of the time, I would say people were sleepwalking or are sleepwalking, and they're like, "Oh, there's a problem." Well, you didn't just get into credit card debt, right? It didn't just happen. Little things led up, and you're like, "Well, I want this big expensive car or a big house because I deserve it." And so everyone has a plan for your money. You have to make the plans first before they come and say, "Oh, you watched this big Durango
Yeah,
commercial. You
yeah,
deserve
yeah.
that car," right? So you again set your sights. So that was something that I think, was that
Yeah.
answering the
Yeah.
question? Like part of how we thought about it. And I didn't come from a rich family. I didn't have any of that. It still takes me longer because I don't have all those resources. Like I don't want to say any rich billionaires' names anymore, but really they probably had some money to get started, whereas for us I don't. But I do have knowledge, and he will be more well off than I was,
Yeah.
I guess, financially
Because when we
anyway.
look at an author, we look at a podcaster, a content creator, or someone on YouTube, and they look like they have it all together, and they're teaching financial wisdom for us as consumers. Sometimes we just assume that these people have never really struggled before, so they don't really understand us as we come to your content for the first time. We buy your book. It's like, well, Brandon's probably had it easy. He came from money. It's so easy for him. He doesn't understand what it feels like to not have the resources, to feel like I'm failing as a dad because I don't have the money to take care of my family the way I want to work my butt off and just feel like I'm exhausted at the end of the week every week, but never really getting ahead. So Brandon doesn't understand that because he's all put together. But there's a component of your backstory that brings that connection with the audience as well, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's part of in our book, but also thinking about, we're in this world of social media where all we see is the top, right? We don't see what got them there, right? The work, the hours, the pain. Why am I so intentional about being a good dad? Is well, my dad wasn't around, right? I believe you can give what you've never received. When people say that, oh, well, I didn't have a good dad, so I'm going to be a horrible dad, I'm like, well, that's a bunch of crap. That's just your way of not taking responsibility. And so for me, it's being intentional, and that's part of our still method in the book. It's set your sights, track your in and out, inspect your progress, look for 1%, and live deliberately, right? And this can be in your marriage. It starts personally with me. I can't overflow to my wife if I'm not taking care of me physically, emotionally, financially. I believe the marriage is a really big piece, and then to my son, and I'm also a caretaker. So all of that, but it requires being thoughtful and saying, okay, how did I get here? And someone even said, well, you make plenty of money. Why don't you buy a bigger house? Because that's not what I want to go after. I want my son to experience a lot more different kinds of trips. And so we invest in that kind of thing.
See, yeah,
Um,
I like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
priorities.
And you need to set those priorities, I think, as early as possible in your parenting life, to kind of know you're on the right path and have a goal to work towards. How 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 young with your son was it when you started talking about money and modeling money for him to start learning these lessons? Like how young did you start with him?
Right away, right? I think he has a banks give, save, spend is his little banks. He's made $450 through Scouts, right? He has more money than most, and he sold a lot of popcorn. He said, the more people you know, the more people you can sell popcorn to. And I remember even when he was 3, going to a trade show, and he had $2. And I said, all right, we're going to go into this thing, and what's going to happen is they're going to say it's going to cost this much, right? And I said, if you go in, you have $2. Just play it and say, oh, bargain with them, because that's what they do in these places. You got to bargain. You gotta say it's too much, and can you bring it down? Do all of that stuff. And so he went in. He's excited. He's got $2. He's like 3, 4 years old, and he goes in. And he's gonna buy this Ninja Turtle toy, and he's gonna buy this thing, and he's like walking in, and he's like, oh, that's too much, literally word for word. And I was literally, the funny thing is my son was in the back. I was telling my wife that, in passing and saying, when we go in here, remember this is how the game works. So if we're going to buy, bargain. I didn't realize actually that he was listening, and so he says that, and then he starts walking away. I was like, wait, oh yeah, I said that. And then I was like, wait a second, go back and counter offer. And he's like, oh, okay. And so he countered offered with it, and he got a lower amount. That was when he was 4, right? And I'm like, wow, this is good. And he also knows about taxes because, I tell him all the time, I'm like God. You, none of it's yours. And so I get to take the ice cream tax or whatever. So he hates taxes already. So, um, that's a good thing. So always teaching, and there's always kind of moments, but also at the same time, I know he's going to get a good foundation of money. Like I know he's the only child. We are in the financial world. It's not about what he gets; it's about the content of his character and his heart and mind. That's on me, and so I'm very intentional in that
Yeah.
regard.
So for our dad space listeners, I like to talk a little dad math, maybe with you, Brandon. Kind of help us to understand. I'm picturing a new dad, new baby. This is my first time ever being a dad. I want to do things the right way. I want to have a plan. If I was a new dad coming to sit down and have coffee with you and talk about my journey and what's ahead, any kind of things that you'd put out as sort of a roadmap for a dad to start thinking about right from day one with your newborn to kind of plan for university, college, life, all the stuff that's coming down the road in the future? Where would I start? How can I invest and start small and start letting it build over time? What kind of wisdom would you give to a new dad?
So I would say saving versus investing are two different things. Starting a life insurance policy on them for sure. And I tell them like as far as financial, I call it the 10-10-10 savings rule. 10% long term, 10% medium term, and 10% short term. Right. And don't just say, I'm going to save for my kids' college. But if I don't take care of me, if I don't put on my oxygen mask first, I can't take care of them. Right. That has to be priority. Again, our own financial health up even above theirs. Right. And so that's not selfish. Right. That is being disciplined. So, but I do the percentages. I never said a dollar amount, but I intentionally put it through. I put it into, again, my life insurance policies for me. But I'm intentionally back ending, right? 10-10-10. I also tied 10%. So I live within 60, right? For us. Now on the time is the same way, right? So we only have 24 hours in a day, right? Everybody, when people say I don't have the time, I'm like, no, you don't have the priority. Don't tell me you don't have the time when someone else, you know what I mean? It's you didn't make it a priority. So for me, what we do is we have regular gym time, taking care of me, date night, which is scheduled every Saturday, and then I have time with him every Saturday morning. We go to a coffee shop, and he has a not so hot chocolate. And we build Legos and do all the things, but we have a designated time that we have. They call it club time in our community of faith. Having those things in place, then they become saying, "Oh, we can't wait to do this," or we do scouts. So we do those things that are really important, and being present, I think, is the most important.
So, okay, talk a little bit, Brandon, too. Then you mentioned the 5 smooth stones based on David and Goliath story that we read about. You've talked a little bit about your faith and your journey as a parent. When we look at the biblical text, there's a lot of financial type references there. Some are in parable story form to kind of teach a lesson, but there's a lot of financial kind of information in there. You wouldn't expect it from a religious text. You're thinking it's more about how to be a nice person or whatever, don't do these things. But there's a lot of financial wisdom there as well. Is there anything else that you lean on for you and your family and how you show up talking about money from a biblical point of view that you'd also like to mention?
Yeah. I mean, like the Bible talks more about money than almost any other topic, even above the poor, right? And so there's a lot that he says, and I'm like, oh, and parables. Or it says the rich person, it's harder for them to get into heaven than the poor person. And so you think about all of that. And for me, even in our world now, of saying, I want to have the character of Jesus, love God, love people, intentionality. That requires resources, right? And so as we go, one of the things that I teach for my son is we have a World Vision kid, a Compassion kid, and we not just say we're doing this, we're involved in our community of faith. My son loves that. He doesn't listen to my music. He's like, that's even 90s music he doesn't like, but he definitely likes. We go to Crossroads here in Cincinnati, and he loves that. And he's like, oh yeah. And so I know there's certain things that we're doing, but also serving. We there's that 80-20 principle. 20% of what volunteers, they're the ones that make up the church, right? That's how it works. And so there's certain mantras that we kind of teach. We do hard things, right? That's the Neelys, right? We're going to do hard things, but we're not going to just say it's somebody else's problem. And we're also going to put our money where our mouth is. Invest in quotes, in a compassion child and in those things. And then we pray for them every night. So those are parts that I think are integrated. And I don't know what the fruit's going to be, right? But I know that I want to instill a son that is showing the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, kindness. And the finances will flow from that.
I'm happy to hear you talk about the compassion side too, and sponsoring children. My wife and have sponsored a child from when he was like tiny all the way to college, and now we've been assigned a new compassion student that we're taking care of. But for our first one, we watched him grow up in front of us. And what a world life lesson for our kids to see when they're coming to us asking for a $60 PlayStation game, and then they see a $60 donation to our compassion child and what he does with it and what he values and what they value. And it was kind of this thing. There was one year where we were able to donate on his birthday, and it was the equivalent of 3 years' salary for his family. It was so much that they had to break it into pieces because they didn't have anything to buy. In his community. So they had to kind of come up with some creative accounting just to deal with this. But they were buying goats and sheep and animals and stuff and taking care of their family. He was buying stuff for his siblings instead of taking it for himself. So I'm showing our kids, you can have a global impact with your money if you take care of your money to the point where you can help other people. And I just feel like we're always just trying to take care of ourselves. We're always so behind that it's stressful. There's anxiety. That's why I love what you talk about the still method. We're always anxious. We're always just like one bad experience away from being completely broke, right? And I think here in Canada, I've heard stats like we're $200 away from complete, bankruptcy and not having any money at all. And that could happen just from being sick for a period of time. So
Yep.
I want people to live better than that, right?
And in the Bible, I don't want to make this a church sermon or anything like this, but it does say, I've come to bring life to the fullest, right? Right. And so I want my son to have a full life.
Yeah.
We go and we experience. And part of even our still method is I want my son to visit 6 of the 7 continents before he's
Wow.
18, right? He's six and
Yeah.
a half. That does not mean we're going to some bougie place, all the time. We are some, but it's going to be, we're going to go dig a well in
Nice.
Africa, right? We are going to do those things. And he's even seen his mom. He couldn't go, but she went to Nicaragua and dug, dug wells, right? And so he's seeing this. And as we lead, again, it's our responsibility, not some schools. It's ours. He's seen like, oh, every year within our faith community, they sponsor gifts for Christmas. And so he like this year, he's like, oh, I want to buy a gift. I have $450, so I want to do a gift for a kid too. And so he pulled his own thing and spent $30 buying a gift for some other kid who's 6. And so I don't know if he'll continue, hopefully, but I want to make sure that we are building compassion. It's not about you, and that's the hard part in our world. It's all crazy. People are all looking at other people and saying they're evil or whatever, and I'm like, it's not our responsibility to judge. It's our responsibility to love and be responsible to our own resources. So that's my dad advice, and some people will be like, yeah, but I'm like, well, whatever.
Good. So for the readers of your book, Five Smooth Stones, what if I have a copy of your book in my hands, I'm ready to read it for the first time, Brendan. Is there a love letter? Is there a message for a new reader before they open that book, crack it open for the first time? What do you want them to know? What is your big wish for them as a reader when they buy your book?
Yeah, so it's a history lesson. What I've learned is what we think we know just ain't so. That's a Mark Twain thing, right? And a lot of what we even hear on media now, a lot of it's all like spun in certain ways. Financial systems, the way it's built, how banks work. I'm like, again, they're there to make money. What I want people to do is open it up with an open mind and have a pen. It is a money journal. It is meant to be work done, and it's not to give you, well, here's the 5 steps to do all this, right? As we do this, and there's another book called The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham, is the questions may be the same, but the answers may change, right? As we go through the still method, as we think through this, how I'm going to operate for my son as a 6-year-old may be different than when he's 15, right? But I still want him to be in those same, like how I operate that. And so I want them to open it, like totally get it, but also write in it, actually engage in it and think. That's the problem in our world is we just tweet or what, I don't know what you call it now, without thinking. And we need to have thinking involved.
Good. Awesome. So that's, we'll have a link to your book in the notes as always. And as we wrap up, Brendan, again, thank you so much for making time to do this. This is great. Again, you've been on How to Podcast. We talked about your show there in more depth. But for listeners, people love listening to podcasts. They're done listening to our episode here. They want to come over and follow your journey on your podcast as well. Kind of, how is your podcast different than some of the other podcasts about wealth and finances and things in the space? What is your specific focus for your podcast? And tell us more about your show.
Yeah, I'm a huge into business. So we talk a lot about how business is integrated. So right now we're talking about teams, right? Also, my wife and I lead this together. So if you go to Wealth Wisdom Financial Podcast, you're going to see both of us interact. She is definitely more thoughtful in her writing than I am, and I'm there for commentary. And so you'll see us almost as a married couple even interact. And so those are things that you're going to see. And we don't just say, oh, yeah, here's the answer. Again, the answers may be different. Right? I'm not going to say all of these things are stupid. Right? That's another podcast for another person's day. But right, that what I want to be able to do is ask questions, and help educate. So that's our podcast, Wealth Wisdom Financial. We are educators first and foremost. And then if you want to get the book, if you go to Wealth Wisdom FP, that's financial partners, wealthwisdomfp.com/shop. You can get the book there.
We'll have a link to that in the show notes. Brandon, thank you so much for doing this kind of a dual purpose episode with Dad Space and Living the Next Chapter. I love what you're doing with your son. And I think he's in a good space. He's going to learn a lot from you over the years, and a great model as well for him, not only with words telling him what you want him to do, but displaying it for him and being an example to him as a dad and as a parent. I think that's really important. And for us as parents listening, you have a big responsibility with your children, not just to tell them how to live their life, but also to show. And this whole thing about do as I say, don't do it as I do, that's not a good teaching moment. We need to display it. We need to show them this is how we do it. And if you make a mistake, you make a mistake. You make changes.
If you will make a mistake. Let's just say, you will make a mistake. It's getting back up and changing. But for sure, if you're a new dad, just step into it.
Awesome. And get great resources in your corner. You got Brandon now. You can go listen to his podcast. You can buy the book. And there's a lot of great things that you can learn from just following Brandon's lead as well. So I would say to every dad and any parent listening, don't try to do this yourself. Don't try to recreate the wheel. Somebody's ahead of you. They're giving out great content. Go follow, go listen, and join in the community, because I'm sure Brandon would love to hear from you and have you listen to his show as well.
Well, thanks, David. I'm excited for what's coming for you too.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Everyone, all information for Brandon, his podcast, his book, and all things Brandon and his amazing family, all in the show notes. Brandon, thank you so much for doing this.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Dave.
Hey, thanks for being here for the Living the Next Chapter podcast. So glad to have you as part of our family of listeners. There's a seat for you just here on Living the Next Chapter, and I'm so happy that you have listened to all the way to the end. Wow, you are now my new bestie. I want to let you know that I host 7 other podcasts on top of Living the Next Chapter. Yep, 8 total. One of them is called the How To Podcast series. If you are thinking, you know what, Dave, this podcast thing seems like a lot of fun, well, I'll give you a secret. It is. It's a great, amazing, fun time where you can get to meet great people, get your word out there, promote your book, promote what your coaching program, whatever you're doing. Podcasting is great. And if you want to learn how to do this, what you're hearing right now, head over to howtopodcast.ca and look up the How to Podcast series on YouTube, whatever app you're listening on. You'll find me there. And I'd love for you to come listen to how to do this. And if you're interested and have questions on how to podcast, reach out to me at howtopodcast.ca. Thank you for listening. Talk soon.